Welcome to the Explainer, everyone. I am so thrilled you're here today because, well, class is officially in session. I want you to imagine me as your resident, very enthusiastic literature professor, ready to guide you through one of the most fascinating, dense, and, frankly, grim-dark graphic novel-style texts we've ever covered. We're looking at the saga of the architects of the Crucible and the Void. Today, we're going to decode the key metaphors of the fire and the frost woven throughout this fable. We'll be looking really closely at the primary text, dissecting how the author pits the agonizing, transformative spirit of becoming against the deeply static Thanatos drive.
To instantly immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of our text, just listen to this chilling first-person introduction from the story's deceptive guide. He says, "Welcome to the city. I am the ghastly ghoul of Revelation, a ghostly, static monument to the void." Right from the jump, the author hits us with this tone of cold finality. The ghoul, who's also known in the text as the uncanny specter, isn't a monster of chaotic destruction. No, he's a monument. He's entirely static, and he represents this unsettling quietude that we're going to tear apart and analyze.
Here is our syllabus for today's Explainer. We've got 5 parts. First, mirrors in the mud. Second, the fire of the crucible. Third, the frost of the void. Fourth, architecture of entrapment. And finally, the Thanatos drive.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, Mirrors in the Mud, the surreal setting of our dark fable.
So the entire narrative takes place in a city described as mirrors in the mud. And you have to understand, this isn't just set dressing. It's a literal, physical manifestation of a profound philosophical divide. The mud represents the heavy, messy, earthly reality, the weight of history and existence. But the mirrors, they reflect something higher, something cosmic. The author brilliantly uses these rain-slicked alleys reflecting cosmic mysteries to show us how the city represents the ultimate divide between two competing architects vying for control of the seeker's soul. The text actually calls this city a surreal playhouse. The alleys hold these mysteries, reflecting stars as these distant, almost impossible destinations that the traveler might reach. But most importantly, this surreal playhouse is the battleground. It perfectly frames the conflict between our two main figures, the Red Spectre and the Ghastly Ghoul. Let's move on to Section 2, the Fire of the Crucible, focusing on the true Red Spectre. To understand the true Red Spectre, we have to decode his primary metaphor, the Crucible. What is it? Well, the text defines it as an alchemical forge. The Spectre uses what's called the fire of imagination to melt down the dull lead of the old world. Think of that dull lead as the heavy, lifeless weight of history. The logic of the Crucible dictates that this heavy history cannot just be ignored. It literally has to be violently melted down and transformed to create a brand new, life-affirming mythos. Now, what's really fascinating about the Red Spectre's character arc is that he wasn't always a creator. The text reveals he used to be a nihilistic executioner who viewed existence as a meaningless error. But he underwent his own alchemical transmutation. Now he stands as a guardian of authentic values. He's the architect of the soul's new foundation, fostering what the text calls the spirit of becoming. And this spirit, it requires enduring the exhausting, messy mischief of constant transformation.
Let's transition to Section 3, Frost of the Void, where we meet our antagonist.
So if the Red Spectre is the heat of creation, let's contrast that with the Ghastly Ghoul. On one side, we have the Red Spectre's fire, that spirit of becoming, demanding constant, exhausting transformation. On the exact opposite side, we have the Ghoul's frost. The Ghoul mirrors the clinical detachment of the last thinker. Instead of melting the soul in the logic of the crucible, the Ghoul offers to petrify it. He wants to lock it into a permanent, unchanging state of rest, a state of total static stagnation.
The author lays this out sequentially through the 3 parables of the fire and the frost. Let's walk through this timeline because it maps out a brilliant psychological trap. In the first age, the ghoul convinces the traveler that the specter's crucible is just a violent lie. Then we hit this dangerous middle ground. Here, the weary traveler seeks structure and is quickly bound by the ghoul's frozen logic. It's a seductive, gradual numbing. Finally, in the great evening, the traveler's internal fire is totally extinguished.
This leads us perfectly into Section 4, Architecture of Entrapment. How exactly does he build this trap?
The ghoul uses something the author terms Apollonian gaskets. This is absolutely crucial to understand. These are intricate structures of rigid, frozen logic. Unlike the specter who melts the heavy lead of the past, the ghoul uses that same heavy lead as an anchor. He uses these gaskets specifically to bind the fluid spirit.
Because this logic is cold and beautifully symmetrical, it suppresses the psyche. It completely eliminates internal conflict. And the tragedy? The traveler actually mistakes this total, static stagnation for true perfection because it's just so much easier than fighting.
And where are these bound spirits kept? In gilded cages. These are beautiful, but make no mistake, they are terminal prisons built upon the dust of the old world. To keep the seeker blindly moving into these cages, the ghoul projects flickering masks of evolution. He creates a mirage of progress. The seeker genuinely thinks they're moving forward, when really they are just being locked away.
Let's break down the mechanics of this entrapment. Step 1. The seeker, desperate for order, signs the ghoul's sovereign laws, but these are literally contracts written in disappearing ink. Step 2. The spirit is bound by those Apollonian gaskets. Step 3. The seeker chases those flickering masks right into the mirrors of a hollow souls. The whole thing is a paradox. The guide's sovereign laws promise order, but they are entirely founded on the literal erasure of the self.
Finally, let's dive into the psychological core of this fable in Section 5, the Thanatos Drive.
I want you to listen to this monologue from the ghoul. By the time the words vanish, you will no longer need a name. To follow me is to accept the erasure of the self as the ultimate liberation. This perfectly defines the Thanatos Drive. It represents a relentless psychological and metaphysical pull toward the end of all becoming. It's the deep, seductive desire for the final cessation of all internal struggle. And this brings us right to the thematic thesis of the entire text, the exhausting burden of individuality versus the seductive comfort of non-existence. On the path of the crucible, you face the agony of becoming. You shoulder the burden of creating meaning, constantly being destroyed and rebuilt in the heat. But on the path of the void, you get the seductive numbing of erasure. You relinquish your individuality, finding a hollow perfection by ceasing to exist as an individual at all.
For those who choose the void, their journey ends in the great evening, where the transformative fire is fully extinguished by the silence of the cage. The text says the seeker is transformed into a pious cow of contentment, residing within a tomb of one's own making. And the absolute tragedy here is that they mistake their own terminal decay and static stagnation for the peace of the stars. They don't even realize they've reached a state indistinguishable from the void itself.
So, we arrive at the poignant juxtaposition at the fable's conclusion. Out there in the city of mirrors, in the mud, the true Red Spectre continues the arduous, exhausting work of forging at the crucible. The heat of creation never stops. Meanwhile, the ghoul's followers remain trapped in a frozen order. They fulfill the Thanatos Drive, achieving a hollow perfection that is entirely indistinguishable from death. They have successfully traded their life for the finality of the frost.
Which brings us to the ultimate question this text asks of its readers, and of you. When faced with the exhaustion of creating your own meaning, will you embrace the agonizing fire of the crucible spirit of becoming? Or will you surrender to the frozen silence of the gilded cage? It's a profound psychological choice between creation and stagnation. Take some time to reflect on your own mirrors in the mud today. Class dismissed, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.